of the arguments that maybe would come back from some pedigree breeders is that, farmers are blindly selecting on stars and not maybe looking at the animals. And personally, I don't agree with that either.
Hello and welcome to AgriFocus. I'm Stella Meehan. I'm joined on this episode by my colleague Agriland technical beef journalist Breffney O'Brien, and our guest today is Chief Executive of the Irish Cattle Breeding Federation, the ICBF, Sean Coughlan, to discuss the ins and outs of the recent changes to the EuroStar beef breeding indexes. So the index is designed to help farmers select more profitable breeding animals. So EuroStar indexes quantify the genetic component of an animal's performance across all traits of importance for Irish suckler farmers. The EuroStar index has two overall indexes, that's the replacement index and the terminal index. So this is to facilitate the use of EuroStar indexes across different farming systems. Some farmers may breed their own replacements, in which case the replacement index is most relevant. Other farmers then may sell all of their suckler progeny as weanlings or take them through to slaughter, in which case the terminal index is most relevant. Now, the star rating system, that's 1 to 5 stars, was incorporated into the EuroStar index to make it easier for farmers to interpret. So 5 stars being good and 1 star being poor. So let's start off, Sean. How did the review of both the terminal and replacement indexes come about and why?
So, Stella, the indexes, so the replacement and terminal index, they came into being in 2012, actually, right? So they've been in place for 11 years now. And they're under constant review. So there's two elements to the making up of the indexes. One is that you actually calculate the genetic evaluation or the genetic merit of an animal for a particular trait. So if we take carcass weight, for example, and you might assess that a particular bull is breeding progeny, for example, that are maybe 5 kilos in carcass weight better than the average. Okay, so that's the genetic evaluation component. The other component then is to put an economic value on that. Okay, so and that's where the Chagas economic model comes in. So there's two elements to it that are under constant review. We're constantly evaluating new traits or trying to improve the accuracy of how we calculate the traits. And also then the economic values are getting updated on an ongoing basis, right? Now, in recent years, probably the last major update was done in 2015, 2016, in terms of the economic values. There has been tweaks to the evaluations ongoing. But in terms of the updates to the economic values, and what we were seeing then, and if we look back, and Paul Crossan has from Chagas in Grange, Dr. Paul Crossan, he has done all of the work on this. And what we were seeing really for us for 2015, 2016, 17, 18, 19, is that the costs, inflation was running very little, like the costs of inputs and the output prices were staying very, very constant. And then since 2020, what we've seen is a dramatic increase in the, beef prices improved, thankfully, but unfortunately also the input costs have increased dramatically. So that is what has I suppose, triggered the reasonably significant change to the economic values of the underlying evaluations. Actually, haven't changed that much. What is driving the major change in this scenario is the actual economics. It's the values coming from the Chagas economic model. What the Chagas economic model does is it basically it evaluates that for 1 unit increase in a particular trait, what is the effect on profitability? So, for example, if you keep everything else constant and you, for example, raise the cost of or raise the value of a kilo of carcass by 50 cents a kilo, what is the impact on profitability? And what Paul does is he does that for all the series of traits to come up with the economic values and what is their impact on profitability. So that process is ongoing, and that will continue to evolve. As I say, on both the evaluations and how we calculate to try and make sure they're more accurate, and also the economic value. So if if next year the Chagas economic model comes back and they evaluate that, look, we need to tweak this again, well, it'll get tweaked. If we find a better way to do calving evaluations or to assess the beef merit or to assess the fertility, they'll get improved. So the process is ongoing. We have a technical advisory group committee within ICBF that actually looks at the technical aspects of it. and assesses that they're fit for purpose. So that's the process. We also then have a process with which we were engaging primarily with the herd books in recent times, in terms of we have quarterly meetings with the herd books where we would be communicating the changes and what was happening. So and that would have happened. The last one of those would have been in July this year.
So what animals are now eligible that previously maybe weren't eligible, Sean?
So the eligibility in terms of, there's two aspects to that, I suppose, Stella. One is in terms of the animals that are actually getting genetic evaluations, that hasn't really changed, right? So all animals that were previously getting genetic evaluations are getting genetic evaluations now. And the main criteria to getting a genetic evaluation is that we know who the sire of the animal is and we know who the dam of the animal is. So generally, there are some exceptions in relation to with genomics, but generally you need to know the sire of the animal. So all of those get evaluated. In terms of eligibility from a scheme point of view, so obviously the idea is that any animal that was in your herd that was previously eligible, previously 4 or 5 star, that animal is eligible as long as that animal remains in your herd. Okay, so from that perspective, in the short to medium term, there really is no change in terms of the eligibility of the animals that are on farm. Where there is where there will be a bit of change is that in terms of, say, breeding the next generation of replacements, there will be some adjustments needed by farmers. But the reality is that the vast majority of farmers, so if as we were looking at the figures the other day, the next deadline for replacements and eligibility of replacements comes in 2025 under the SCEP scheme. And at that stage, a farmer needs to have 65% of his females over 16 months need to be 4 or 5 star. At the moment, as we stand today, 82% of the participants in SCEP are already qualifying for that target. And even for the 2027 target, which is the target after that, where you need 75% of your females over 16 months to be 4 or 5 star, the figure for that is 70%, and that's without farmers doing anything as of today. So some farmers will have a little bit of work to do, but the vast majority of farmers are going to be absolutely fine, and the effect is not going to be perhaps as significant as some are making out to be.
And then, Sean, just to look at some of the key changes that have been made to the most recent index changes, like what effect will they have on the subsequent star ratings of the suckler breeding animals? So like the specific changes that have been made, what I suppose are some of the key ones there.
So I think if we think about it, so if we take the output first of all, right? So on the carcass weight, Breffney, right? So the carcass price has increased reasonably significantly, which is just reflecting the market price and is reflecting the thing. So the animals that are producing quite a lot of carcass are getting a bounce on that side. On the other hand, then one of the things that Paul Crossan has highlighted that is the input costs are increasing quite significantly. So in terms of the input costs, what are we talking about? We're really talking about feed and fertilizer costs, so the generation of feed and labor costs. They're the two significant ones. So one of the things, for example, that has seen an increase in the cost is around difficult calvings, for example. So obviously, a lot of suckler farmers are part-time farmers. Okay, their ability to be on farm all the time, to be watching cows and so on. So the tolerance for difficult calvings has definitely been dissipating as more and more people are trying to juggle full-time jobs and managing a suckler herd as well. Also, what is happening, and we're especially seeing that in the West, is the cost of getting a vet out, even the availability in some cases of getting a vet out to manage a cesarean section, and the cost of the cesarean section, and the labour cost associated with minding the cow afterwards, perhaps minding the calf afterwards, and also the impact on subsequent fertility associated with, a cow after a cesarean is going to take, at least an extra month to go back and calf than a cow who has had a normal calving. So that's one aspect, and then the other one is the feed aspect. So one of the things that we're seeing is that those breeds where the size of the cow has been increasing, and the cost of keeping that cow has been increasing faster than the output and the increased output of carcass weight has been coming. So some of those breeds. So I think that one of the impacts, Breffney, is that, I think we're probably going to see a stabilizing of the cow size, whereas, over the last, 10 years, I think the cow has been increasing in size.
Just to come in on that there, Sean, and you might have touched on it already, but how will the changes impact skep farmers as regards, will they be positively or negatively? How many farmers will be positively or negatively impacted? Now, you have touched on it already, but another one is, I suppose there is a concern out there that these changes are going to prioritise the dairy beef cross animals and will increase the number of these that are eligible under skep. Is that the case?
Yeah, so look, I think that is definitely a narrative that is out there that somehow these changes are somehow geared to benefit the first cross from the dairy. The opposite is actually the case, right? So the opposite is the case, is there are less 4 and 5 star first crosses from the dairy after these changes than there were before. Okay. And what we've been seeing actually over the years, and this has been the case really since the first suckler scheme came in back in 2008, the original suckler cow welfare scheme came back in 2008. We've been seeing that, if anything, there's a stabilizing or a slight drop in the number of first cross from the dairy herd that are coming in as suckler cow replacements, and that's hovering in or around the 20, 21, 22. So 4 out of every 5 cows, are beef cows coming from the beef herd and not first cross. So that narrative actually doesn't really, it doesn't hold. I mean, and the stats bear that out, Breffney, that there are less first cross from the dairy going to be 4 and 5 star and eligible.
Yeah, and now obviously, Sean, there were some farmers whose stock were negatively impacted by the changes. What can these farmers do to remain skep eligible? So
the key thing there, Breffney, is that as I mentioned previously, any of the animals that are already eligible are going to be eligible going forward. So it's not that. So even if those cows maybe some of those cows have gone from 4 star to 3 star, for example, right? They're still eligible from a skep point of view. Okay. So the tricky thing then becomes, all right, fair enough. You do need to then pay attention. If you're going to want to breed from that 3 star cow, you need to be using a good, probably 5 star bull on the replacement index in order to try and ensure that the progeny coming from that mating are going to reach the 4 star standard minimum for going forward.
I suppose there, what Breffney was saying to remain skep eligible, you have pointed out that anyone who drops from the 5 or 4 maybe down to 3. But assuming, we'll say, a particular suckler farmer had a significant number of cows drop to maybe, 1 and 2 star, what should they do now, Sean?
Yeah, I mean, that is tricky. Those are very, very, those commercial farmers who have dropped that number of stars is quite a small number. 84% of the cows in the commercial herd that were 4 and 5 star previously are still 4 and 5 star. Okay, so there is obviously then there's a percentage dropping, and there's a percentage rising. The same number are dropping, and the same number are rising. So the number of farmers in that position is actually is quite small. And look, we're planning on running a series in the spring of information sessions to actually try and address those particular farmers where maybe they have had a significant drop. Well, how could those commercial farmers make sure that they have skep eligible animals? They're probably okay for the next deadline. Maybe we're looking 3-4 years down the road in terms of how we manage that. And look, it's for some farmers it's not straightforward, and we're not saying it's easy. But we will be working with them to manage that in the medium term. As I say, the big thing in the short term, there is no need for any of these farmers to worry.
And the other one then, obviously, so you've said that if a cow has dropped from a 5 star to a 2 star, it will remain eligible in the herd. But will its resulting progeny be eligible? And the other one is then, Sean, is the percentage. So obviously not 100% of the animals must be 5 star in a herd. So there is scope there for for a certain number of these cows to remain in the herd if they are performing well on farm.
Yeah, I mean, and that has always been our position, Breffney, in terms of because even at the start of the BDGP back in 2015, there was a concern that people have these good performing 1-star cows, and that they somehow might need to sell them or so on, and that's not the case. As I say, the next BDGP target that needs to be hit is 65%. So 6.5 out of every 10 cows need to be 4 or 5 star, and then in 4 years' time, in the end of 2027, that rises to 3/4 of the cows' needs. So there's always room to actually keep the high performing 1-star cow, and they are out there. There's no denying that they are out there. The key thing is, on average, we want to be moving more towards the 4 and 5 star cows. And even when we look at, because again, doing some of the meetings around the country recently, the idea that somehow the good weanlings are, we're not going to be able to produce these good weanlings anymore. The biggest percentage of weanlings that were exported in 2022 came from 5-star cows.
So that's the top E&U grade weanlings, like.
Yeah. So look, they typically tend to be the weanling sales parlance. They tend to be the fancy weanlings that are being exported, and the biggest percentage of those were actually 4 and 5-star animals back in 5-star animals back in. Of the animals, there was 30,000 animals were exported in 2022, and that the majority of them were from 5-star cows.
So you've mentioned obviously the number of SCEP applicants that will benefit and lose out from the changes, but with regards to the dates for having the required number of replacement females in the herd, that's for one given date. It's not for the duration of a year they must be in the herd, Sean, is it?
Yes, yeah. So they're and to be honest, like they're the requirements as they're defined by Department of Agriculture. So yes, so on the 31st of October, so this past 31st of October, there was a deadline. It was what was the animals in the herd at that date, and it's the same then at the end of 25 and at the end of 27.
So these animals don't essentially have to remain in the herd for the duration of the year. They can, but they don't have to, as defined by the department rules.
As currently defined by the department, that's the way it is, personally. Yeah.
Overall, you said 84% are going to stay around the 4 and 5 star, Sean, but I suppose that does leave 16% that are going to drop. And who's to say that another 16% that were 1 and 2 or 3 star don't rise? As you said, it'll average out. But for the 16% that do have the drop there, what sort of consultation, what sort of information is being given to them? I suppose you're no stranger yourself to attending meetings where there is farmer frustration out there from the suckler sector.
Yeah.
That, a lot of suckler farmers maybe don't understand what you've explained to us there now and the ideology behind reviewing it in the first place, And what sort of, help is available there to those farmers?
So I think the and from attending meetings, it's clear that, suckler farmers definitely feel that their backs are to the wall, and with good reason. I mean, they're under all sorts of pressure from all sorts of angles, and there's no doubt about that. I think in terms of what tends to be the case when we get down to trying to assess is it almost becomes, Stella, almost a case by case basis, right? And that is one of the things we're going to be working with both the private advisors, but especially with the Teagasc advisors as well, to actually in the new year and doing some work ourselves to go out and say, okay, if this is your scenario, because you have a number of different scenarios. You have somebody that's perhaps buying in their replacements. Or you have somebody that's looking to breed their own replacements and wants to keep a closed herd, and what are the challenges around that? And there are different challenges for the different scenarios. There's no doubt that some people would say, look, suckling is a straightforward business. I would argue differently. Suckling is quite a complex business if you're trying to, especially if you're trying to breed in a relatively small herd. Trying to manage that balance between trying to breed replacements, which you're looking for one set of traits, versus trying to breed weanlings that you're looking to sell and that are ultimately going to slaughter. And it's not a straightforward balance to achieve, and it definitely will require quite a bit of attention.
And there is obviously a helpline there with ICBF for farmers who have specific inquiries, is there?
Yeah, there is. Yeah, so they ring the SCEP helpline or ring the Herd Plus helpline for those that are members of Herd Plus. So we're taking lots of calls on an ongoing basis. I mean, I suppose what we'll be doing after Christmas in the new year is getting on the front foot a little bit and not waiting for farmers to call us, to kind of go out and help farmers to start thinking about, okay, what's my strategy now for going forward? And look, and I think in the vast majority of cases, it won't require a significant change in strategy. I mean, it's one of the things I was saying last week. You were in Carrick-on-Shannon as well, Breffney. Is that I genuinely don't believe that farmers will have to change. If you're working with a particular breed, there's still plenty of variability within the breed, and there's still plenty of opportunity within the breed to continue to use that breed. It might require a tweak in the bulls within that breed that you're using, but there's still loads of variation within the breed, and we can continue to exploit that. I mean, the 70 odd% of the suckler herd is covered by Charolais, Limousin, Simmental, and Angus, and I don't see that will change.
In terms of the 5-star rating, then on the EuroStar index, Sean, an overall question I might ask you is, do you think there's a lack of understanding or real comprehensive understanding of the star rating among suckler farmers? Because you would have organisations like the ICSA that was in contact with us, saying that most suckler farmers want to breed a good stylish calf that'll sell well in the market or is fit for export, and then there'll be the penalising of bulls that may be just a couple of percentage points over the average for calving and so on. So, do you think that maybe there needs to be a bit more of an understanding of the rating system and why this review is taking place?
Completely, Stella, completely agree. And like one would argue, perhaps we've been at the dairy for longer. So we've been at the dairy for 20 odd years, whereas probably, it's more like 12 or 15 years we've been really getting stuck in on the beef side. We're still on that journey on the dairy side. So it's no surprise that we're going to be also on that journey on the beef side. And you have a huge variation of, a really broad spectrum of understanding. You have some farmers that really have a really good grasp of what's happening and how the indexes are made up, and then you have people that go out and they just have 4 or 5 star on their head, and do they really understand what it means? Possibly not, and maybe that's not helpful, and one of the arguments that maybe would come back from some pedigree breeders is that farmers are blindly selecting on stars and not maybe looking at the animals, and personally I don't agree with that either. I mean, I think we have a pair of eyes. That's a good tool. We have a set of indexes. They're also a good tool. You're actually going to make the optimum decision, I think, by using both in combination rather than blindly going one or the other. So there's absolutely no doubt that there's an ongoing education challenge there, Stella. There's no doubt about that. The challenge I think that we face is that the whole space is becoming so crowded. I mean, in terms of the amount of schemes now that farmers on the ground are having to deal with, the amount of paperwork is increasing. The noise that's coming maybe from social media as well. So it's a very, very challenging environment to actually get to sit down. And these suckler farmers are also very busy. A lot of them are working full-time jobs, trying to manage the farm on a part-time basis, and then we're trying to also get time with them to actually how do we to try and get time to engage with them, because the first thing they have to do is make sure they meet their advisor to make sure they're compliant on all the cross compliance and the forms and all the different schemes and acres and all the different schemes, and then at the end we're trying to battle for that little bit of attention. And it definitely is a challenge. No, that's not an excuse. We have to get out there and do it. There's no doubt we have to do that. It's not easy, but it needs to be done. But it is a journey, and I don't think that journey will ever finish. There'll always be the bell curve of some people who have a really good understanding, and some people who really don't have much of an understanding. They just have in their head they know they need a 5-star animal to qualify for the scheme.
I agree with you there that it's a journey, and probably definitely more information and consultation with the sector is needed going forward to embed these changes. But with anything, if you put a deadline on something for something to be implemented, it feels more cliff edge to the farmer end of things. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
Than anything else. So that leads me on to maybe just a final question, Sean, in relation to a review of these indexes. Now, you have said there at the offset at the very beginning that this is something that's kind of going to continually take place. But when might the next review? Is that something that's just going to be ongoing, or we'll say in 2025, would we be maybe looking at something like this again, where it would be more of a concrete changes and an implementation time frame?
I think, to be honest, I mean, like if for example, if we find, so I mentioned earlier that there's two aspects to the evaluation. There's the calculation of the values, say for example, again, for carcass weight, there's the calculation that this bull, for example, is breeding progeny that are 5 kilos better than the average. Okay, there's that. Now, if in and there's ongoing research happening at the moment. So if we find a way to calculate that more accurately, we'll bring that in next year. So that subject to the various checks and balances and so on, we'll bring that in. In a similar way, if, for example, Paul Crossan from Chagas comes along and says, look, I think we need to update the economic value for X, Y, or Z because something has changed in the meantime, well, then we can take that and we'll implement it. So we're not necessarily going to wait until 2025 if there's something that we can, if we can make the change next year and the science backs it up, we'll make the change. So we don't have these, we're trying to keep it as an evolving, agile process rather than these waterfalls where we're saying we can't make a change again for 2 years, or we can't make a change for 3 years, and then so it becomes much more of an iterative process, and that's what's been happening as well on the dairy side, and we're doing sheep. So last year, a lot of the changes that are coming in now on the beef side, they came in last autumn on the dairy side. But we also brought in some further iterations this autumn on the dairy side. So that's an ongoing process. So that's why I think, and I think that's the best way, because none of us have all the answers all the time. So if we learn something, we should take that learning and implement it as soon as we can.
Well, Agriland will play its part as well in any information we can provide to the sector. Breffney is constantly following the indexes. He attends the meetings and everything. So if we can educate either the sector or also convey farmer views back to the likes of ICBF or back to Chagas, we'll definitely do it. That's all we have time for on this AgriFocus podcast for this week. Thank you to our guest, Sean Coughlan from the ICBF, for joining us today on the beef breeding indexes. Please rate and review the podcast on Spotify or Apple if you get the podcast there, or indeed you can get the podcast on the Agriland website or on your smartphone app. Until next time, take care.